Welcome to Agency in Motion Marines, sponsored by KPMG. For the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network, I'm Mimi Geerges. The U.S. Marines represent some of the most elite military professionals. These warfighters consistently demand victory, in part due to their determination and strong sense of identity. To preserve and strengthen this ethos in an era of great power competition, the Marine Corps will need a transformed talent management approach that meets the objectives of Force Design 2030. Modernized personnel systems, workforce processes, and data management to support the individual Marine's experience from recruitment to retirement. First, we'll talk to the Marine Corps official in charge of Manpower and Reserve Affairs about how the service is approaching organizational and personnel changes to maintain readiness and win on the battlefield. Joining me now is Mike Strobl. He's Assistant Deputy Commandant for Manpower and Reserve Affairs and a retired 20-year veteran of the Marine Corps. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So for fiscal year 2022, you met your retention goals. Why do you think you were successful when other services are struggling?
Well, all the services are facing some headwinds, both with recruiting and retention. We did have a very successful retention year. We divide our retention cohort into two groups, what we call our first term alignment plan, or those Marines that are coming up on the end of their first 4 years in the Marine Corps, and then the subsequent term alignment plan, which is everyone else, the more seasoned veteran Marines. We achieved 101% of our retention goal for the first termers and 106% of our goal for our second termers. So we were very proud of that. A few things that contributed to that success. One is we put a full court press on our commanders and what we call our career retention specialists, who are sort of the recruiters of current Marines to get them to stay in, if that makes sense. And our commanders came through just heroically with talking to Marines, showing them the opportunities available, and getting them to decide to re-enlist. Another thing we did, we implemented a few process changes and eliminated some of the bureaucracy of re-enlisting in the Marine Corps. We put out a publication of some of our top 10% Marines, and we invited them to go through a streamlined process to re-enlist, where we essentially collapsed what was a 20-step paper-based process into one step where they just could tell their commander, I want to re-enlist, and the commander approved it, and it was done. So we made it a lot easier. And then the last thing I would say, we also have worked very hard to remind Marines of the essential mission of what they do for our country every day, and I think that really resonated.
Can you tell me a little bit more about who was retained that you were able to keep? Was it more the enlisted? Was it more heavily in the more the older officer corps?
Mm-hmm. We haven't had as many struggles with retaining our officer corps as we tend to do with the enlisted corps. I think a lot of our officers come in with longer term views than many of our enlisted do, at least initially. So like I said, we were very successful with our enlisted force that already had at least 4 years behind them. We exceeded by 106%. We exceeded our goal. As far as specific skills, they were pretty much evenly spread across the skills that we need, with a few exceptions where we fell short in some occupational fields, but we over-executed in others. So good news is Marines, once they join the Marine Corps, they seem to want to stay with us.
The Commandant has said that the individual Marine's journey is a top priority. What does that really mean, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, we are trying to move away from what you might call an industrial age manpower system, and we are trying to give Marines a little more agency over their career, more choices, more input, and more feedback as well on what might be good for them as far as an occupation, either as they enter the Marine Corps or when they re-enlist. So we implemented what we call Talent Management 2030, which is a recognition that every Marine is different, and we can't take a view that if you're an infantry sergeant, that you're just like every other infantry sergeant. They all have their own background, their own aspirations, and their own unique skills. And we're trying to get better at learning about those skills and what makes each Marine unique and matching them up with a job or a position in the Marine Corps that maximizes their potential.
But how do you do that? Because you mentioned Talent Management 2030, and that's the blueprint for, quote, the right people with the right skills in the right place. But how do you know what those right skills are? Because this is for future conflicts.
Right. So one thing that we're getting better at is just asking Marines what's in your background, what makes you unique, and then we've also implemented some new ways to get at both cognitive and non-cognitive aptitude and skills. One of the things we kind of plagiarized from our partners in the Army is what's called the Tailored Adaptive Personality Assessment System, or TAPAS. And what it does is it gets after non-cognitive skills, things that we care about as a service, but previously we weren't trying to measure. And things like grit, very important to being a successful Marine, and might be even more important in some cases than some of the other metrics of cognitive skills. So we've been administering the TAPAS for about 5 years, coming up on 5 years now, and are getting more and more data on its relevance and what the TAPAS scores tell us about a Marine that we might not have known in the past.
You know what, before we talk about the data, I want to ask you about maturing the force, because the blueprint also calls for that. And that's the focus to get the more skilled, older Marine, if you will. What are the benefits of that?
Well, a couple of benefits. One is if we can retain a Marine, which is kind of a little bit about what Mature the Force is about. A couple of years ago, we would separate at the end of their first term about 75% of our enlisted force, way more than any other of the services. Part of that was due to our force structure. We've got a very steep pyramid as far as grade structures, which we are evaluating. But we understand, we recognize that if we can retain a Marine who's already proven him or herself as suitable and skilled at being a Marine, that's at least one more Marine we don't have to recruit. And I say at least because sometimes you have to recruit more than just one to eventually get that Marine to become a sergeant, somebody that has demonstrated that they have an aptitude and skills to be a good Marine.
But you know, maturing the force costs money.
Right.
So pay, benefits, housing, all costs more. So what are you going to do to address that?
Well, one thing is our new force design construct calls for a slightly smaller Marine Corps than previous years. So we just, to start out, we need fewer Marines than we did over the last, say, 10 or so years. Another thing, though, as I alluded to earlier, is if we can retain, granted a maybe more expensive Marine because of his or her greater seniority, we can maybe dial back on the number of Marines we need to recruit, and not only recruit, but put through our very extensive entry-level training pipeline. So we think we can, if we invest a little more in our more senior Marines, we can free up resources that are currently devoted to recruiting and training our younger Marines.
So you started to tell me about kind of the data that you're collecting around personnel. And I'd like to know a little bit more about what data you're collecting, and how do you know that you're using that data effectively? Yeah,
I suppose right now I would have to say time will tell whether we're using it effectively. I am excited about some projects we're working on. We might talk a little more later, but I'll just give you a sneak peek. We have partnered with Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab on an AI machine learning algorithm that takes a multitude of data points that we know about Marines and even applicants to be Marines. And when it's fully functional, it will give us probabilities of their success first at boot camp and then over an entire career. So and then as far as what data are we feeding into that, like I mentioned earlier, we have cognitive and now non-cognitive information on skills and aptitudes of our applicants and our Marines. That's one example of some data we always had and some data that we're just now starting to collect.
You know, the Defense Department as a whole is currently modernizing all of its enterprise systems. So I want to know about the challenges that you're facing in modernizing those personnel systems.
Yeah, two challenges I suppose are that are probably common to in many efforts, both in the military and in the private sector, is we're constrained by time and money.
Not surprising.
Yeah. So we would like to be going faster than we have been so far on our modernizing of our manpower information technology systems. We do have to be mindful, though, as part of the federal government, to follow all the applicable rules to IT acquisition and spending money and the right kind of money, if you will. And so that brings me to the second constraint, which is money. It's not a huge, in the grand scheme of things of the Marine Corps and the DoD budget, maybe not a huge portion of the budget, but we do need additional resources to do things that we haven't done in the past.
Do you think that this will be an upgrade to the existing systems mostly, or will it be a complete overhaul?
A little bit of both. We're constantly upgrading our systems to be more reliable, more secure. But also there is, like the AI machine learning project I mentioned with Johns Hopkins, that's just totally new. That's essentially an overhaul, some things we have never done before. So it's really a mix of both.
How do you think industry partners can help you with addressing those challenges of cost and time?
That's a great question.
Keeping costs down, that's
yeah,
for one.
Yeah. I think making an effort to learn about what we need and what how the military could partner with industry would help us quite a lot. And also, I think we have a lot. We, the military, DoD, have a lot to learn from the private sector. There are fabulous examples of outstanding talent management all across the private sector and other parts of government. And we are never shy about plagiarizing what works for them if it fits within our constraining statutes and policies.
I want to ask you about culture, because the Marine culture is very unique. It's ingrained in every new recruit. Can you tell me about the changing attitudes and policies towards women in the Corps, and really what you're doing to better integrate and include more female recruits and officers?
Yeah, great question. Let me start with the end. Last year, fiscal year 22, we recruited a historic high of female officers. We were over 15%. Like I said, it's never been that high, and I'm very proud of that. We are about total force. We're about 9% women. We think we'll get up around 11% this year. Over the last 5 years, there's been a number of changes that I think are for the better to make the Marine Corps more appealing to our female Marines and to female applicants. A couple of examples. 5 years ago, we opened all military occupational specialties and all previously closed units to females. And as of the end of this fiscal year 22, 1,300 female Marines were assigned to units that were previously closed to them, and more than 600 female Marines had earned a military occupational skill that they were not eligible for prior to that policy change. And what that does is that shows both the male and female Marines that women can do anything. They're just as valuable and just as essential to our lethality and readiness as every other Marine. We've done more gender integration at our recruit training, which is another, I think, very important step, because it's important, I think, for our most junior Marines right at the start of their career, for the men to see that the women are doing the same training they are, and the women also are seeing that they're doing the same training as the men. And also both our men and our women are seeing role models, staff NCOs and officers, and NCOs, non-commissioned officers of different genders. Let me, if I could, tell you about how my career in the Marine Corps started out. I went to 3 months of an all-male boot camp. Then I got commissioned as an officer, and I went to a 6-month all-male officer basic course. From that, I went to a 6-month all-male artillery school, and then I spent 3 years in an all-male artillery battalion. So
it's a lot of time not seeing a female officer or recruit.
It is, and it's you know, I think back on it, and one, what a waste of talent to have that cohort of Marines sidelined from the, in my case, to be able to contribute to artillery battalions and artillery regiments. But it also, I think, inevitably fostered, or at least had the potential to foster kind of a second-class citizen mindset. But that's gone, because every Marine, regardless of gender, is able to do the same thing, and they train together right from the outset.
You know, the Marines are reevaluating everything from their physical fitness requirements, there's family leave policies. How do you get all stakeholders on board and keep them on board with all these changes?
Right. Well, every change, every policy we implement is designed to enhance our readiness and lethality, and that is the culture of the Marine Corps, is readiness and lethality. We are America's force in readiness, her 911 force, if you will, and we start from day one, whether you are a new private or a new second lieutenant, ensuring that mindset is inculcated, and you everything that we do is designed to enhance and preserve readiness and lethality. So when you put it in those terms, Marines understand it.
You met your retention and recruitment goals for fiscal 2022. How is fiscal 2023 looking?
Well, we're, what are we, about 6 weeks as we record this, about 6 weeks into the fiscal year 23. I would say it's a little too early, probably, at least to make an assessment of our recruiting efforts. But I do know our retention efforts are off to a great start. We seem to have carried a lot of momentum through from FY22. And it looks very good for our retention. I'm also very confident that we'll make our recruiting goals for 23. It's just a little too early to have that data yet.
So, Mike, what other initiatives are you looking at to really invigorate that individual Marines experience?
One thing we are working hard to develop and deploy is what we call the Talent Management Engagement Portal, or TMEP. You know, we love our acronyms, so TMEP. Which is sort of a talent marketplace for Marines, where they can interact with what we call their monitor, the person who decides their assignments, and commanders out in the field can essentially post job announcements and specific skills that they're looking for, and more than the skills that we previously would track, which would just be a Marine's rank and occupational skill. A Marine can go the vision is a Marine can go into the TMEP and list specific skills. It might be a language skill, it might be an off-duty education, it might be a civilian pre-Marine Corps experience that they've had, and they can list that, and a commander can post, I'm looking for a Marine with these sorts of skills, and the commander, the Marine, and the monitor can all see this in real time, and it increases transparency, and I'm certain will increase job fit, which will lead to even greater retention.
I want to go back to your personal experience. You were an active duty Marine, you saw combat. I wonder how your personal experience has informed your thinking about these topics.
Well, it has definitely informed my thinking. I was a lieutenant in an artillery battalion out at Camp Pendleton, California in 1990 and 91. And we had just gotten back from a regularly scheduled deployment when Iraq invaded Kuwait. And literally days later, we were sending Marines out to 29 Palms, California to form combined arms task force to rapidly deploy to Saudi Arabia and stem the tide of what ultimately became Desert Storm and Desert Shield. And when I came off of that previously scheduled deployment that I mentioned, it was a lot of fun. We visited some really neat places in the Western Pacific. We did some hard training, but it was mostly just a great time. And then suddenly we're preparing for combat with no notice. And that lesson has stuck with me to this day. And it goes back to that mindset that we try to instill in all of our Marines, that they need to be ready and lethal to be the nation's 911 force.
All right. Well, Mike, thanks so much. Nice to talk to you.
Yes, thank you.
Up next, we'll hear from an industry leader on ideas and best practices to implement a talent management strategy and the technology that supports it.
Agency in Motion, Marines, is sponsored by KPMG. Learn more at read.kpmg.us/modgov.
Welcome back. I'm joined by Kim Myers. She's Managing Director at KPMG. Kim, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
You have a background in change management for large organizations. What do you think the Marine Corps' biggest challenges are going to be in meeting those requirements for Force Design 2030 in talent management?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So transformations are hard, and we are people, and people come with emotions, and we come with our own set of challenges. So I think first and foremost, some of the challenges that you're going to see are more on the people side of the house and less on the technology side. So I think you're going to see that the Marine Corps is going to really want to work on their communicating early and often and throughout the entirety of the transformation. I think they're going to have to work together. It's not an individual event, it is a team sport. And there's a lot of different elements of this transformation journey that are going to rely on the buy-in of other stakeholders. They're going to really touch other people's lanes of work. And so if the organization doesn't come together and work through it together, then I think you're going to see some initial challenges there.
Well, they did meet their retention and recruitment goals for the last fiscal year. Other services did not. So what do you say they need to do to build on and maintain that success?
So I think the Marine Corps has a really awesome mission, and I think the people that the Marine Corps recruits are different from some of the other services. So I think continuing to share that story, to continue to share that ethos and really communicate the value of the Marine Corps is going to be really important. I think to continue on that overarching journey, though, to really fully reach the goals of Talent Management 2030 would be to take a more Marine Corps-centric approach. What is it that the Marine as an individual today is looking for in a career? What types of technologies are they looking to experience? Really, what is their overarching plan for their life going to be? And making sure that the Marine Corps has the technology to support that, as well as the processes in place to really give the Marine the empowerment to be who they want to be, as well as give the command the power that they need to help facilitate that.
You know, there's a lot of legacy systems in the Marine Corps, and as you said, change is hard. So what do you think their first step should be in adjusting to this change?
Yeah, so I think that it really starts off with what the end target operating model is. What do you need in systems? What do you need in that technology? What are the different technologies that are going to interfere with each other or impact each other or support each other? And getting really clear on what that end goal looks like. I think at that point in time, you can start to get a better appreciation for what systems might need to sunset, what systems might be okay to just have a facelift, and what other ones need to just be replaced at this point in time.
And you heard in the previous segment about the streamlining of the re-enlistment process and how well that's going. What other personnel processes do you think can be better streamlined?
Sure. So I think there are a number of different processes that can work together better. I think a lot of what we see right now is silo data, you seeing silo systems, and when you don't have more of that talent management data back end, it's hard to really have a full picture of that Marine. And I think the Marines that are going to be coming up the ranks in these coming years are going to really want that full life picture. And so I think what we'll have to do is take a look at the processes that need to work more collaboratively together.
And we hear that a lot about siloed data and that data not being used effectively. What are some best practices around bringing down those silos?
So again, humans are tricky and technology is tricky, but it is even more tricky when you start to talk about individuals who maybe help bring that system together in the first place. And I think it really is going to take a lot of coordination, a lot of collaboration, a lot of negotiation internally with the stakeholders to really start to take a look at those systems. I think that'll be an important one.
Well, let's talk a little bit about getting that buy-in from stakeholders, because that's not easy.
It is not easy, no. I think a lot of the times we take a look at the different personas. So who are the stakeholders? Who is the one that has the lead on this assignment? Who's taking ownership and taking charge of it? And then what are all the different stakeholders that come to that table? What are their personalities? What are their wins? Where are the areas that they're going to struggle with? And how do we help get everyone on board for that overarching mission and driving in that same direction?
We talked in the previous segment about maturing the force. What do you think are going to be the big challenges that the Corps is going to face in their process and in their efforts to mature the force?
So a lot of the maturing of the force right now, I think some of the concerns that I'm hearing is more on the monetary side. I think, as we noted earlier in the segment, the Marines who love the Marine Corps are going to stay in the Marine Corps, because they just love it. That is their family, and you continue to see that after they retire. I think when we start to talk about maturing the force, the concerns are on how much is that going to cost, and what data analytics are we looking at to best understand the full impact of maturing the force. So there might be a bigger dollar associated to retaining that Marine. However, there's some trade-offs. We might have fewer recruits. We may need fewer recruiters out there. We may need fewer facilities to support those recruiters. We may need fewer instructors. We may have less time down for training and more time out doing what Marines do best. So I think that there's some significant data analytic work that can be done to help to support what the maturing of the force would look like from a data perspective.
What are your ideas on managing all these changes so that you don't end up with change fatigue? I mean, too much is going on.
So in this case, the Marine Corps is looking to undergo a very large transformation. And so it is going to require the Marine Corps to take a more journey experience and kind of plan out what that journey is going to look like. It's really important for folks to be aware of what's happening, and you want to be able to celebrate along the way. I will give you an example. When I start to think about a change journey, I start to think about the Marine Corps Marathon. And if you've ever run the Marine Corps Marathon, you know what's happening ahead of time. There's advertisements, there's a lottery system to even get into the Marine Corps. And then all along the course, you have roadmaps, you've got cheer stations, you've got water stations, you have fuel stations, and that's what's necessary through the entirety of a change journey. So the fatigue does happen when there's too many things happening at one time. The fatigue does happen when the celebration stops happening. And so I think it's really important for the Marine Corps to think about this entire transformation as a journey and really plan out all the celebrations along the way.
What do you think, what do you see as the primary role that industry partners can play in helping the Marine Corps achieve these goals?
So I think there's a couple of different ways that industry can be leveraged. Really, one would be the guide. I think a lot of industry can provide a good guide. So we can walk along with you, and I almost sometimes describe this as a GPS system. I can help you understand where to start. Once I know your destination, I can help you understand where to start. I can also give you live feedback throughout the entire journey, say, hey, there's a pothole up ahead, you might want to avoid it. Or, hey, it's getting a little construction-y over here, you might want to find another way, and let me redirect you. So I think industry can really play a great role in helping to be that directional beacon for the Marine Corps. I also think that industry can help with technology solutions. They can help with making those solutions, but they can also help with the integration of that technology. Again, because change is hard, and it's not as easy as turning something off and turning something else back on.
And finally, any other things that the Marine Corps should keep in mind as they embark on this journey? Any lessons that they could pick up from other services?
Well, I think just that. There are lessons available from other services. And so I think it is important to be knowledge sharing, to be cross-collaborating and understanding what's working well and maybe what's not working well. And I think that it's really important to know that you don't have to start from scratch. You're not in it alone. It is a team sport, and that there are definitely people in the industry who are certainly willing to step in and help out.
All right, Kim, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching Agency in Motion Marines, sponsored by KPMG. This is the latest installment of our Agency in Motion series. For more information about the subject matter we discussed today, go to govmatters.tv/AIM and scroll down to Marines. For the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network, I'm Mimi Geerges.